Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is while you're watching this. Thank you for joining me in my 10,000 mile review of my Royal Enfield Himalayan that I bought in September 2022 from Cooperb Motorcycles near Wollaston in Northamptonshire. If you just went on the specifications, which have got lower numbers on than when I asked my female friends to score me out of 10, you probably wouldn't look twice at this bike. I certainly wasn't considering one, but I had a couple of friends with them that said what fun they are, and I was in the market for a new bike, so I thought I'd go for a test ride. And when I did, I found out it was rather splendid. You can look at the air-cooled 411cc single-cylinder 2-valve engine and think, well, that's not going to put out much power, is it? And indeed, the 0 to 60 time is 14.5 seconds. And I didn't use a stopwatch for timing this, I used a sundial. Now the big claim about the Himalayan isn't earth-shattering performance of a BMW S1000 XR, it's a claim that it will go anywhere and do anything. Indeed, Enfield used the tagline, all roads or no roads at all. So, no roads at all, such as riding through the jungle here, it's absolutely brilliant. The goat tracks that I seem to find when I go out, it's great. Riding through town, it's great. Riding on A roads, going round corners, despite a 21-inch front wheel, which people say doesn't steer, it's great. Motorways and dual carriageways are not the place to be taking a Himalayan for any long stretches. I did about 90 miles on the M1, a slight uphill into a headwind, opened the throttle to keep 70 miles an hour on the clock, and there was about a mil left on the throttle. Another thing, if you try and keep the bike above 5,000 RPM for any length of time, you'll use some oil. I think this is my second bottle of oil, and I've got through about 1250cc of oil, which isn't bad, but it would be better if it got through none. But then I don't rev my other bikes at the top of the rev range, and I would expect they would use oil in a similar manner, if not more so. The other thing is that trying to keep up those speeds like I was, you get through the fuel a bit quicker than you'd expect. I got mid 50 mile per gallon out of it on that particular ride, whereas normally I'd be expecting at least 70 miles per gallon, usually in the early 80s, which is good because when you come to fill up the small tank, it's about 13 litres of usable fuel in this, the bottom of the tank sits directly over the spine frame, so you can't get the nozzle in very easily. I tend to point nozzle when I'm filling up towards the back of the tank, stops petrol splashing out everywhere. Keeping the bike in its more natural environment of A roads, B roads and off roads, the original equipment Seat tyres are pretty good. They don't last too long. The rear one only gave me 4,500 miles. There was a bit of a shortage of rears at the time, so I got both changed out, and I'll come on to which ones I've got on it at the end of the film. The brakes are a make I'd never heard of, Bybree, but I'd heard of Brembo. I've got those on some of my other bikes, and yeah, these are indeed the cheaper version of the Brembo. But you go back 10 or 15 years, this brake would be on a lot of mid-range bikes. So it's, yeah, slightly older than the modern stuff. It's not radial or anything like that for a start, but it does the job. People say they're wooden. I haven't found it so, to be honest. It does stop. You can get the ABS to come in. Let's face it, if the ABS is coming in, your tyre can't brake anymore. So that means that the brake is certainly good enough for the tyres. The front mudguard is absolutely huge. You don't need anything on the bottom of this to extend it, although I have seen a couple with a small skirt on from Pyramid Plastics, but these have also had the mudguard raised on the fork mounting. Not something I've felt the need to do even when going off-road. Either side of the tank and protecting it are these big tank rails. They double up to hold the instruments and the headlight, and also they're very good for mounting bags on. I use these bags on my bike. When it comes to the headlight, sticking your key in and turning the bike on, you get a nice LED side light, position light, whatever you want to call it, and starting the engine gives you the headlight. This may look quite bright. I'm filming directly into it from fairly close, and sticking it on high beam, yep, it's still very bright as well, at least in daylight, looking directly at the headlight. And again, I'm just going to come back to that in a minute for some more detail. Looking at the switchgear on the handlebars, like me, it's simple. Looking at the instruments in the dark, they're bright. The tripper, which is the right hand one where you can't read anything on it, is exceptionally bright. You've got a handful of idiot lights, a proper analog speedo, proper analog tacho, fuel gauge, yep, that's interesting, and a gear position indicator. On the older models, mine's a Euro 5, but on Euro 4 and before, this would be a compass, which would be entertaining in the fact that it would tell you there was a magnetic field, but it wouldn't be too keen on being exactly which direction you were facing, and you'd have to recalibrate it fairly often, as I understand it. I think that's quite a nice little touch. I'd quite like that instead of a gear position indicator, which on the earlier bikes did fit in this space here on the main display. There's also 3 push buttons on the dash, the mode one, which will cycle through 2 trips and reset them, and also weirdly you get an average speed as well as the mileage you've covered on the trips, which I've not seen on a bike before. Yeah, I've got average speed on one of my other bikes, but not inbuilt into the trip meter, but it's a nice little feature. You do get a mode button on a 411 single cylinder 23 horsepower bike. Yep, if you push and hold it, it changes the temperature from Celsius to Fahrenheit and back again. There's also an ABS button. This one disables the rear ABS only. If you want both sets of ABS disabled, you have to pull the fuse. If you've disabled the rear ABS on the button, turning the bike off and back on re-enables the ABS. I've tried it, the bike without the ABS off-road, yeah, it didn't really make any difference, to be honest. Moving back to the headlight, at night with a very bright instrument cluster, it's hard to see. It's pretty appalling, to be honest, for riding on unlit roads. You can't fit an LED bulb because that changes the pattern of light and would fail an MOT. You can't put a higher intensity bulb in because that will actually damage the plastic lens on the front of the headlight, but there is a solution for that. Under the seat, and excuse the wiring here, it is the only place I've found for any accessory wiring, and the spotlight, relay and controls are fitted under here, as are a lead from a battery and the sat-nav, because I plug my sat-nav into my battery charging point when I'm not charging the battery. I'm very unlikely to need to use a battery charger and a sat-nav at the same time. Under the rear seat is a little space for the manual. It'd be nice if you get more storage space under bikes these days. That's something that I really do miss. Under the rear seat, with what appears to be a slowly failing piece of elastic band, is the toolkit. You get quite a decent thickness of plastic, mock leather on the pouch for this one, with a nice Royal Enfield embossed logo, and the tools you get are the usual basic stuff to have a go at doing a few things on the bike. I wouldn't use these except in an emergency, to be honest. I much prefer using proper tools. Throwing the seat back on is quite good actually, compared to a lot of bikes these days, although with a front cool cover you do need to just lift the seat slightly and push them both in together, and that's the best way I've found of resecuring these. Rear brakes, another Bybree one, and the rear disc is quite large for a smaller bike, and also it's very strong. You can quite easily lock this up, or you would be able to if the ABS didn't come in, but it's good. It's not at all wooden like journalists would have you believe. It's just a case of using it as a brake like you normally would on any other bike and just adapting to how it feels. Rear lights are bright enough, 8 LEDs as you can see here. Brake lights very bright as well, although there is a slight problem with the front brake light switch, which I'll cover at the end. So for a standard package, it's a very nice bike. It's light, it's certainly manoeuvrable. I'm doing a full turn here on a doubly off-camber road, and getting within a couple of inches of the BMW, feet up, nice and easy to do with a little bit of practice. Off-roading is great on these. The manoeuvrability seems to be helped by the fact that the sump plug seems to be made out of some incredibly dense metal, and that's where the centre of gravity is, although it doesn't always help me because my off-roading skills are a bit pants. When it comes to modifications, I would say that the most important one for riding at night, especially on unlit roads, is going to be a set of spots. These will mount on the tank frames. As you can see, they get a bit covered in mud when you do off-roading, and when properly set up they will give you a greater spread and greater reach of light, as you can see in the comparison between these two photos, and they do overcome to an extent the brightness of the instruments. However, my tripper is disconnected. This reduces the brightness of the lights an awful lot and helps you when you're riding at night. I've actually gone one step further than just having the tripper disconnected. I've actually removed the whole thing because I'm not going to be using it with it disconnected, so I might as well take it off completely to save getting water in the back of the unit. You can see, you just take the screen off, you pop the little connector cable out, then it's 2 Allen bolts, remove the tripper, and there's also 2 washers that sit at the back. These need to be pulled off as well, and you can see the connector there with the yellow marking on it, plastic bag over it with a rubber band to keep any water from going into it, and also tuck it out the way. It's going to sit behind the screen, so it is going to stay fairly dry, but every couple of months I'd look at just having a pop in there again, have a look at the plastic bag and the rubber band and make sure everything's still nice and tight and dry. Something that's rather pleasant when you buy a new Enfield is you get some goodies. I think this is specific to Cooperb. You used to get given a t-shirt that's related to the bike you've bought, but from Royal Enfield themselves you get a little box full of treats. And yes, you've paid for this like you've paid for the t-shirt in the purchase price, but it is nice to get a little something. So opening the box, there's a leather key ring and a layer to remove like Christmas chocolates. There's even more goodies underneath in the form of a badge, a buff and a sew on patch, or with the Royal Enfield Riders Club. Another pull out, so even better than Christmas chocolates because you get 3 layers, and the biggest lump of all is a mug. So yeah, you've paid for these in the purchase price, but it's nice to get a little something to go with the bike as well. Having already covered the lights, let's have a look at a few other mods that are useful for the road. I got the second look mirrors fitted to my bike when I bought it because I couldn't quite get my head around the convex mirrors that the Himalayan comes with. These do look a bit spindly, but you do get a very good view of the road behind rather than of your elbows and shoulders. I prefer these ones because they're flat, and all my other bikes are flat mirrors and it's what I'm used to. Looking from the front of the bike, you see that they're basically a ram mount system, which means they're going to be robust. And also, if you're off-roading and you drop the bike and you knock these, they'll just fold in. So they won't actually break, at least not so far in my experience. You can see I've got a cool cover on the bike, already mentioned, and I've got luggage rails for the genuine Royal Enfield ammo case style aluminium panniers. And these are really good compared to some other bikes because for a start you can stack them, and even though these are empty, if I give them a wobble they don't have a tendency to fall over, so if they're gently knocked they're probably not going to end up all over the floor. Fittings are doddle. I've got a slight modification on these in the form of some marquee ties, so you do get a bit brutal, bang them on hard. It's designed to be roughy tufty. Then you go inside, spin the bar to the upwards position that locks it against the pannier rail, grab your big nuts, make sure that they get nice and tight, and you've got to treat these a bit like cylinder head bolts. Tighten one, check the tightness on the other one, and carry on until they're both nice and secure and you can't tighten them any further. Then one hand on each of your little nuts and nip them up, because these are the lock nuts that stop the big nuts coming undone. One thing you may notice over time, when you try and open the lid, the little retaining wire can sometimes wrap round one of the mounting points, the forward one on the bike. Quite a simple solution, this one. Undo the little retaining nut on the pannier side, quick half turn of the wire, 180-degree turn, and just chuck the nut back on to start with. Have a quick check. Stop wrapping itself around the bolt, then nip it up, 6mm spanner time, and give your smallest nut a bit of a tighten up, and you're well away there. You're always going to be able to open up when you need to without any hitches. I also got the Givey rack adapter for mine. One thing is a 45 litre cheapo E45 top case stops you opening the side cases. You can bend the lids round, it's not very sympathetic, so if I've got the top box on as well, anything I need day to day will be in the top box, anything for overnight stays will be in the panniers. Looking underneath the rear mudguard, we come down to the swing arm, and behind R&G shock sock, or whatever they call it. I like shock sock, I think that's a good name. If nobody's patented that or trademarked it, I think I might. Shock sock, it's a good name. Anyway, one of these will stop all the crap getting on your shock absorber. You can also get huggers and hugger extender type things, and you can actually see here there's a real tide mark. The swing arm will cover part of the shock, but the top and bottom points, including the mounting pivots, do get covered in crap, so I prefer not to have to replace any needle bearings or anything else if possible. So a shock sock, yeah, good little investment there. You will already have noticed that I've got the braced handlebars on this rather than the standard Royal Enfield ones, and also I've got handguards as well. Did ask for black ones, I couldn't get any when I picked the bike up, so I said chuck some bright red ones on it, that'll be fine. A lot of people have commented on these and I always reply, well, you noticed them, so car drivers might actually notice them as well. I don't have heated grips on the bike, but these handguards do actually keep quite a lot of the breeze off. For off-roading, Cooperb do something that appears to be made out of leftover tank parts in the form of a rather large bash plate. Yes, it looks agricultural, but who cares if it's going to save your bike? And the important thing, compared to the original Enfield one, is that it wraps around the exhaust as well. And as both of my off-road oopsies have been on the right-hand side, this has probably paid for itself already. Another useful thing is a better oil cooler guard. There is one on it as standard, but this one's heavier duty. And a rear brake master cylinder guard as well. It's quite easy to fit. You pop off the two bolts that hold the master cylinder on, chuck the guard on and put the bolts back in. Also on the grille theme, I've also got the headlight grille, and this has saved the headlight while riding through what appears to be a jungle near where I live. One thing, if you get these from somewhere like China, saving a few quid, you don't often get these little top hat pieces that you need with longer bolts to actually mount this. And I would always advocate using your local bike shop, because if you need something in a hurry, you're going to get it from there, not mail order from China. Another bit of kit I'd recommend for off-roading are handlebar risers. These give you an extra 20mm of height on the handlebars, and it's a lot easier when standing up. You're not as hunched over and in a more natural stance for when you do your off-roading bits and pieces. One thing that's not currently fitted, because the green lanes around me are closed, is the Givey side stand foot plate. More than doubles the area of the side stand foot to stop you sinking in when you off-road. It does catch on the centre stand spring, so that's annoying, so that's not why it's fitted until off-road season starts again in June. If you're a customer of Cooperb and you have a Scram or a Himalayan, you're more than welcome to join us on the Scramalayan days. Bit of a guided tour around some green lanes near where I live. Nothing too strenuous, and it's just a bit of relaxing fun and an introduction to trail riding. And there's even an option to miss sections if you don't fancy doing them. In 10,000 miles, I've had a couple of issues with the bike. First of all, the oil consumption slightly annoying. Secondly, the exhaust has got two shields on it, and keep an eye on these with a 10mm spanner because they can fall out. The one at the rear is a slightly different screw. It's black rather than silver, but I don't care. It's there, keeps the shield in place, but just keep a check on these. And at 6,000 miles the head bearings went. It was known that late 2022 there were a few issues with head bearing failures, so mine were replaced. I did pay the difference between the standard ones and the uprated ones to get some heavier duty ones put in, so hopefully it won't be happening again. Now, a long time ago, at the very start of this film, I was talking about the brightness of the tripper, and I think I found the reason for this. The tripper will switch between day and light at 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. So in the UK, these are our daylight times throughout the year. The red lines are at 7 AM, 7 PM, and you can see that above and below these lines, you'll be riding in the dark with a very bright tripper shining in your face. The nearer you are to the equator, the closer the days are to 12 hours in length and 7 till 7 for daylight. And in Chennai, where these bikes are built, this is the day-night cycle, so you can see it is a lot closer to 12 hours, and I think that's probably the reason why you get a 12-hour switch over on the tripper rather than one that would be more used in the UK. You can get various performance enhancements for the bikes, such as different exhausts, different air filters, high lift cams, but when you're starting with a maximum of 24 horsepower, you're only going to get maybe another 2. So if you did want more horsepower, just buy yourself the 450 version rather than this one. There's also a lot more toys on it as well. The one concession I've made to improving the performance of my Himalayan is I fitted it with a quack shifter. Although I do have to be careful with this, because if the World Anti-Doping Agency ever caught up with me, they might ban me from competitive athletics competitions for a couple of years for being in possession of performance enhancing ducks. So in 10,000 miles of riding, has anything gone wrong? Some of the finish isn't the world's greatest, it's starting to flake off a little bit in places, but this is on the luggage rails, not on the bike itself. The front brake light switch is a known issue on these bikes, and particularly in cold weather it can stop working. As it's a normally open switch and you pull the brake lever, releases the switch plunger and it then makes the brake light come on. You need to keep an eye on this, so if it does happen, use your back brake as well as the front, because that will still light up the brakes, and then when you get the chance, just pop this screw out, drop the switch out, give it a few presses to free it up and put it all back together again. If you ride regularly, it'll probably be a couple of applications of the front brake after you start riding and it'll all start working again normally. The head bearings went at 6,000 miles and were replaced. I did pay the difference for the upgraded version, so that's something you might need to be aware of if you've got a late 2022 Himalayan, because they did have a batch of head bearing problems. Servicing and consumables, the servicing's at 3,000 mile intervals, so quite short, but it is a screw and lock nut tappet system on the bike, so it does need to be kept on top of. The original chain and sprockets lasted 9,000 miles, that was including on and off-road riding and riding all year round. The original Seat tyres, they lasted 4,500 miles I think for the rear before they were pretty much gone. Didn't have any of the rears in stock, so I swapped over to Continental TKC 70s. They're mainly road biased, but they're good off-road as well, at least as far as I've gone. But then, you know, I don't ride motocross style levels of mud, so they're perfectly good for that. They do feel slightly strange when you first put them on the bike. When you're 2 or 3 degrees lean angle, the front can sometimes feel like it's trying to follow the tread pattern, but it's not an issue and you soon get used to it and stop noticing it. Well, there we are at the end of the review, 10,000 miles after I bought it, and the big question is it a keeper? Yes, it definitely is. I wouldn't want it as my only bike, but I certainly do enjoy going out on it, and I put a lot more miles on this than the Tracer 9 I bought a couple of weeks later, and had to put this at the back of the garage, so I would put miles on the Tracer, of which there'll be a 10,000 mile review shortly. In a sentence, Himalayan, great fun if you're not in a hurry. And let's face it, Tom Cruise can't be wrong, can he?